but I really think it's an extraordinary election. I want to pick up on a couple things that Judy said, because I think they're great trade-offs like I have never seen before. There may have been better candidates. There may have been people who were more ready for the presidency before, and there certainly were greater ideological schisms, I think, with Landon and Roosevelt. I did not cover that one. Or even Barry Goldwater and Lyndon Johnson. Certainly the differences, the ideological differences were greater. But some of the really fascinating dynamics of this election I'm not quite sure we have seen before. One really is the experience versus change. Americans want both. They really want, I mean, I think most people believe, for all the talk about we don't want a politician. I love when people say the one thing I don't want is a politician. I mean, imagine if Donna Shalala, when she picked that new U football coach, said the one thing I don't want is anyone who's had anything to do with football. I mean, really. Or if you're going in for neurosurgery, to say the one thing I don't want is some guy who's ever dealt with a brain. I mean, I want somebody who knows politics. And then I love to hear, well, Eisenhower wasn't a politician. The Supreme Allied Commander in World War II wasn't a politician. Give me a break. But there may have been people who have had better experience, but people want experience. People want someone who is ready to take office, if you will, from day one. There are always surprises in day one. Or day 2 or day 17. The beginnings are almost always a bit rocky. But they want that, and people desperately want change. I mean, I think there really is, if you look at this question that pollsters always ask in the right track, wrong direction about America, we are as pessimistic as any time we have been in modern polling, as pessimistic as we were during Watergate. People think the country is just not doing well. It's not a specific complaint about the war or about the economy or about health care, about anything specific. It's just in general, we're not doing well, and they desperately want change, and they want change in Washington. So these balance off against one another, and each of these candidates tries to cut into the other's constituency. Obama, by picking Joe Biden, by saying that I'm, you know, I think it was down here in Florida when it may have even been at the University of Miami when he had his economic advisors out. You know, he didn't have a bunch of 37-year-old, junior faculty members. He had Paul Volcker, and he had Bob Rubin, and he had the aforementioned Larry Summers, and he had people who were graybeards and that. And so he's trying to cut into that. And John McCain, by picking Sarah Palin and by stressing that I have always been an agent of change, trying to cut into that. But that's a great clash that's going on. There's no question that those people who go on November 4th and primarily care about experience will vote for John McCain. Those people who primarily care about change, most of them will vote for Barack Obama. But it's a great clash that we're going to see. There's another clash that I think we're seeing, which is a cultural one. And this is a little bit difficult for some people because the traditional cultural conservatives aren't crazy about John McCain for some reasons that are rather irrational even. But they really aren't. He's been too much of a maverick. He had a tough campaign against George Bush. But they know they don't like the Democrats. And so that's one group. And there's another group that really is, I think, particularly Judy mentioned young people. When the issues, I don't know about you all, but when issues come up like gay marriage, when I talk to an 18 or a 19 or 22-year-old, they look at me and say, well, why? Well, what's the big deal? I mean, they just don't understand that. Why that's... There really is, I think, a huge generational divide there on some of these cultural issues. And frankly, the other element that is there, it is what Governor Ted Strickland, a marvelous governor of Ohio, calls the elephant in the room in this election, and that is race. And anyone who tries to deny it just isn't dealing with the real world. I'm not sure Barack Obama could have gotten the nomination if he had been a 46-year-old freshman white senator from the state of Illinois. I really rather doubt it. And I also think, if given all those fundamentals that Judy cited earlier, that if Barack Obama were a 47-year-old white guy who had beaten Hillary Clinton and gotten the nomination, he'd be probably 8 or 10 points ahead of John McCain right now today. And just imagine for a moment, for anyone who thinks it's not a big deal, just imagine for a moment if at the Democratic Convention in Denver, the Obamas had appeared with their 17-year-old unmarried pregnant daughter and her boyfriend. I mean, does anybody think that the same reception would have taken the same celebration, in which I think was totally justified? I'm not knocking the celebration of two kids going to get married, But does anybody think that the reaction would have been the same? So it's there. I'm not sure how much it's there. Again, my favorite pollster, Peter Hart, thinks there's a great trade-off which will balance they'll balance one another out, that there is a closet, what they call Bradley effect. Tom Bradley ran for governor of the state of California in 1982 when he was running about 3 or 4 points ahead in the polls right up to Election Day, and he lost by a couple points because there were people who didn't want to say they weren't going to vote for someone because he was a black guy. Doug Wilder faced the same thing when he was successfully elected governor of Virginia. So there is a so-called Bradley effect. The AP did a big survey last week saying it may be as much as 6%. I think that's certainly exaggerated, but it may be 2 or 3%. Peter Hart's theory is there's also a 2 or 3% enthusiasm factor, that more young people will vote than ever before. I'm not going to bore you with stories about polls, but I've run poll both first for the Wall Street Journal and NBC and now for Bloomberg and Los Angeles Times for the last 25 years. And what you do is when you get likely voters, you do a model. And that model is predicated in large part on did people vote before if they were eligible to vote, and all sorts of questions. One of the questions that Gallup asked, Gallup's the worst poll around. I don't believe any Gallup poll. Among other things, it asked, where's your polling station? Well, you know, 25% of Americans aren't going to vote on Election Day. So they have no idea where their polling station is, and they don't really care. But even the good models basically are predicated upon a certain percentage of younger people and African Americans turning out. They're going to go off the charts this year. They're going to go off the charts. Peter says they'll balance each other out, and I suspect he's right. Final point is, people say look at the map. Well, if this is election decided by 4 or 5 points, we don't have to look at the map. We don't have to look at the Electoral College. Anyone who wins a presidential race, a national race by 4 or 5 points, the map follows. It won't be circa 2000. But if it's a close race, if it's a 1 or 2 point race, then that map or the states or the Electoral College matters. And there you have to give a slight edge to Obama, because I'm going to leave out 2 very important states for just a moment. There are a whole series of so-called red states that went for Republicans in the last couple contests that Obama has a real chance to carry. At the top of the list is Virginia. Virginia has changed more than any other state I know. They used to call Virginia 20 years ago a hotbed of social rest. I mean, it really was the most conservative, staid place, and it's just changed. I mean, Jim Webb is the senator, and Tim Kaine is the governor, and Mark Warner is about to be elected with about 65%. Northern Virginia has primarily been responsible for it. It's changed. So Virginia is a state that, at a minimum, is even maybe tilting slightly blue. Colorado, some of these western states, Colorado, New Mexico, Nevada, conceivably even Montana. And the other southern state would be North Carolina. All of those are states that could well go for Obama this time. The offset for John McCain among, as I say, I'm leaving out 2, Wisconsin, Minnesota, New Hampshire, and Wisconsin and Minnesota are real long shots. So in a close race, I would say the map looks a little bit more favorable for Obama, and then there's the big 2, Ohio and Florida. And I will guarantee, one thing I know, I've been wrong about a lot of things, but one thing I will guarantee you is that the last 10 days of this election, any of you who live in the Sunshine State or any of you who live in the Buckeye State will see a lot of Sarah Palin and Joe Biden and Barack Obama and John McCain. And again, what's important is McCain probably has to carry both of them. And Obama, with this other possibility, can probably afford to lose both of them. But if he does, there's no margin for error. So I hope we won't be up until 5 o'clock. My dear friend Tim Russert won't be here with his board. And it's a real crime that the best political reporter in American journalism isn't with us this year, and I miss him every day. But we may be up late election night looking at these 2 states, and if you want to place a bet as Florida, as Ohio goes, so go at this election.